Mount Fuji is the national and tallest mountain of Japan and the most iconic landmark of the country. It is a 3,776 meters tall active stratovolcano that has remained quiet since the last eruption in 1707. And yes, you can climb it. We didn't. Mount Fuji was by far the main thing I wanted to photograph visiting Japan. I am, after all, mainly a landscape photographer. So we decided for a couple of nights next to the volcano and hoped the weather would cooperate. And cooperate it did. For the most part. After spending a week in Kyoto, check out last week's video to see everything I photographed there, we took the Shinkansen bullet train to Mishimi Station and a bus further on to Kawaguchi Station. I had decided beforehand to spend the night on the northeastern side of Lake Kawaguchi as it seemed there was the most bang for the buck in that area when photographing Mount Fuji. It is important to say that Mount Fuji is huge and you can see it from everywhere in the surrounding countryside, so it is not like you have to stay in that area. I just wanted the opportunity for a reflection, some foreground trees and maybe reeds and of course relatively easy access to the most famous photograph of Mount Fuji, taken from the Arakurayama Sengen Park with the pagoda in front. But more on that in a moment. Let's start along the walking trail along the northern shore of Lake Kawaguchi as what I really wanted was one of those epic photos with a person in the foreground and a reflection of Mount Fuji in the lake. There are several viewpoints along the trail, but I found this location to work well as I could line up the shape of the top of Mount Fuji with a small bend in the shoreline so that the bendy shapes were repeating. This is actually something I talk about in my second ebook about composition, repeating patterns. I could then have Sophia stand exactly in that bend and add that human element both for scale and a sense of adventure and groundedness. Now, because I was traveling, I had only brought my small high-speed travel tripod, and it simply doesn't have the height of my regular landscape photography tripods, which meant it was impossible to get a proper separation between Sophia and the top of Mount Fuji. If the camera is placed at a greater height above the ground, you get more mid-ground in your scene. And since the mid-ground contains the separation between my elements in this scene, the taller tripod would have been optimal. So to compensate for the lack of a bigger tripod, I had to fix this issue in Photoshop by duplicating a photo I captured without ripples, moved it up a bit and then blended it in on top of itself. This was quite easily done because there was no texture to take into consideration, and then make the gradation between the layers work by adjusting the brightness and color. As it didn't feel right to ask the couple on the beach to move, the wind had sadly picked up before they had left and I could place Sophia in the right position. But despite us waiting for about 15 minutes in -8 degrees Celsius, the wind just didn't die down. It turned out it simply wasn't possible to capture a good reflection photo during sunrise. And when the elements just don't play ball, you have to figure out a way around it. I ended up taking one of the first photos from the sunrise with Sophia in place and then blend that into the pre-sunrise no-ripple photo. It took a bit of masking and cleaning up, but I am very satisfied with the result. The soft blue color and atmosphere from the blue hour light works so well with that first kiss of pink light from the sunrise on top of Mount Fuji. But the morning had only just begun and I knew that a bit further ahead I could capture even more foregrounds at a location called Nagasaki Park. I can live with the birds ruining the reflection, but once the wind picks up, there's just no chance. Would have been nice though. Right now I'm waiting for the sun to come up over the mountains over here, hopefully light up the foreground, so I can use some of these reeds in the foreground, because I think they look quite magical when they get lit by the sun. So now the sun is coming up over the mountain and I'm trying to include the reeds here in the background. Now I still have so many waves and ripples on the water that it doesn't really work for that. But if I zoom in and just get the top of Mount Fuji and then have these golden reeds in the foreground with the polarizing filter on, it actually looks quite beautiful because you get that interplaying colors between the blue sky and the golden reeds. So it's orange and teal-ish, golden and blue. Looks pretty good. You can see here how big of a difference it makes when you apply a polarizing filter and the angle of the sun is perpendicular to your subject. You really deepen those blues and cut out the haze, with the result of the camera in aperture priority compensating for the added darkness by increasing the exposure and the reeds in the foreground becoming brighter. I played around with the reeds and different compositions for a little while, and I captured a quite good collection of minimal photos. I also used some of the pine trees on this location as foreground interest and got a few photos here that I also quite like. I would have preferred a cherry blossom or some red autumn colors, but in mid-February that is of course not possible. If you do struggle with color or benefiting from the light you can capture throughout the day, such as neutral colored light as in these examples, I have recently released a 251 pages minimal text ebook all about light. It has chapters and sub-chapters about the golden hour, the blue hour, midday light, artificial light, the different directions of light, color and color theory, the impact of editing your photos and how it relates to light, and a couple of final chapters on how to benefit from it all and use it optimally in landscape photography. I have also included extensive EXIF data on all the photos so you can get a better picture of how I captured the photos. I really appreciate all the positive feedback I've gotten so far. If you choose to sign up to my newsletter, you can get the free light version of all my 3 ebooks, this one on light and my first 2 ebooks on composition. There are links to everything down in the description of the video. After this super cold session and some breakfast, we headed up the mountain to a location where I knew I could capture one of those reddish torii gates in front of Mount Fuji. I had seen some pretty cool photos from this place during my research, but my research also showed that in the recent years the location had sadly turned into more of a selfie location. I'm not the one to judge the owners of the place to earn a bit of money from a popular Instagram view. After all, someone has to take care of it. But from an aesthetic point of view, I simply just don't think this location works anymore. The green carpet and the rope ruins the foreground completely. I got a few photos of the torii gate in front of Fuji, but didn't really want to spend more time there. During the day, we headed downtown to another location that is quite popular. More so than I expected. From here, with a long lens, you can get a compressed photo of Mount Fuji down Honcho Street. There's a lot of traffic on this road and there are even guards there to help take care of safety. If you can't see Fuji from the clouds and want to wait it out a bit, I can recommend a light lunch or a coffee at the small cafe just across the street. There are also other viewpoints of Fuji all around town, so I would highly encourage you to explore a bit. It is just that this specific location has become quite popular. Although I would like to say I'd go and visit and explore all the unknown and off the beaten path locations that Japan has to offer, but when I visit a country for the first time and my time is limited, I prefer to check out the most famous locations. There is a reason why they've become famous, so obviously I had to photograph the probably most famous scene in all of Japan. So we have arrived to the Arakurayama Sengen Shrine or park to capture that one super famous shot of Mount Fuji with the pagoda in front. It is super easy to find. There is a bit of a climb with a few viewpoints on the way to get to the pagoda, and if you just follow the signs you'll easily find the viewing platform. I figured I'd prefer to photograph sunset here as the sun sets at a bit of an angle to the mountain but still within the frame of the photo if you want to include it. If you have local clouds there is a chance of them lighting up. But obviously, it being sunset, there will also be many more people there than at sunrise. As we were out of the high travel seasons, we probably encountered less people there than normal, but it was busy enough for it to be super awkward setting up a tripod. I didn't see any signs explicitly stating you should not use a tripod here, and that was something we generally encountered several places, so I do not think the tripods per se are banned here, but it is Japan, and read the room. There's a big emphasis on etiquette and not being a bother to other people, which is something I personally highly value. And in the end, there was plenty of light anyway, so you wouldn't need a tripod during sunset. So there are plenty of angles to photograph the pagoda from, with Fuji here in the background. It's simply just a question about finding a spot along here, and dependent if it's sunrise or sunset, use the light optimally. Personally, lighting-wise, I really like it from this side right now here at sunset, but I do think the main shot, which is a little bit further over here, is the one I do prefer when all comes to all. And by shooting from the most famous angle, you can also include the sun. I was pleased to see that I only needed my 16 to 35mm wide angle zoom lens to get the photo. You can definitely use longer focal lengths and zoom into Mount Fuji and capture other compositions, but for the main photo, a 16 to 35mm is what you want to use. As the sky was mostly cloudless, to add a bit more interest, I played around with getting a sun star with the pagoda. I also tried to capture a few photos where I only included the pagoda, which I also quite like. As you have already seen from this video, I do not mind a bit of editing to get the photo I have in mind, but I usually try to keep it somewhat believable and respect the light and color I capture on location. For these photos, I had the idea of trying a very stylized editing reminiscent of Japanese art, where the picture is only black and white, and then you have the red sun in the background, as you see in the Japanese flag. All mainly black and white with some warm colors on the landscape and buildings, so basically keep the red and potentially yellow colors of whatever is in the foreground and then desaturate everything else with the help of the HSL sliders in Lightroom or Camera Raw. I actually think these photos turned out really well, and these photos are actually a cool example of editing with intent, but let me know down in the comments what you think about them. I have started my spring sale where you can get entire $100 off my huge post-processing course, Photoshop for Landscape Photographers. It is in this course I share all my techniques for editing photos. Everything from introducing you to the programs over the basics and light adjustments to the harder techniques with luminosity masking, cleaning your photos seamlessly, dodging and burning, controlling and or adding glow and atmosphere, blending layers and photos, and much more. With 30 plus videos and 20 plus hours of techniques, there is so much to dig into. Along with the link to my ebooks, you can find the link and the coupon code to the course in the description of the video. Since I knew the pagoda would be lit, we stayed around enduring the coldness, and as all people basically left just after sunset, I did dare to take out the tripod to get a blue hour photo of the scene. The following day I decided to revisit this location as we had layers of medium and high clouds, and according to the forecast it should be somewhat clear in the direction of the sunset, so I figured there would be a chance of the clouds lighting up, and if nothing else I'd get a moody photo of the pagoda with Fuji in the background instead. However, as predicted, the sun did break through enough to light up some lower clouds and bathe the scene in color. And since there were way less people, probably because it didn't look like there would be a sunset, I dared setting up my tripod and photograph through the blue hour as to be able to make a time blend where I combined the artificial light of the pagoda from the blue hour with the colors of the sunset. I'm just so happy with all the photos I got from this trip to Japan. It honestly delivered more than what I expected, although I did have to do a bit of problem solving along the way to get the photos that I wanted. Check out the description of the video if you want to learn even more, and of course also check out the video on the screen right now where I meticulously work through how to avoid taking boring photos.